Pacific Ocean, 1941, a battlefield stretching across more than 60 million square miles of open water. When Japan struck Pearl Harbor on December 7th, the United States was thrust into a war unlike any it had ever faced. The Navy, still recovering from the shock of the attack, scrambled to assert control over a theater defined by vast distances, unpredictable weather, and an invisible enemy. In this immense expanse, some ships simply disappeared, swallowed not just by the sea, but by mystery itself. Among the earliest of these vanishings was the destroyer USS Edsall, DD-219. Commissioned in 1920, she was a Clemson-class destroyer assigned to the Asiatic Fleet, a small, outnumbered force stationed in the Philippines and the Dutch East Indies. When Japan's offensive began sweeping southward, the Edsall was part of desperate Allied attempts to slow their advance. Her mission was clear but perilous: escort convoys, protect retreating ships, and harass Japanese forces when possible. By early March 1942, the Japanese had all but conquered the Netherlands East Indies. The Edsall, under Lieutenant Commander Joshua Nix, was last seen on February 28th near Java, performing escort duties for the damaged seaplane tender USS Langley. When the Langley came under intense air attack, Edsall and the oiler Pecos were ordered to pick up survivors. They rescued dozens, but as Japanese air superiority grew overwhelming, the destroyer was ordered southward towards safety. She never arrived. For decades, the only clues were fragmented: a garbled distress signal, a vague report of gunfire heard by Allied airmen. Official records listed the Edsall as lost to unknown causes. Families of her 185 crew members were left in the dark. There were no survivors, no wreckage, and no confirmed battle report. It was as if the ship had been erased from the sea. But in the years after the war, a stunning discovery emerged from Japanese archives. A film reel recovered from Imperial Navy records showed the Edsall under relentless attack, bombarded by Japanese battleships Hiei and Kirishima, and cruisers Tone and Chikuma. The footage, shot by a Japanese war correspondent, showed the American destroyer weaving through shell splashes, firing back with her last rounds. Despite being hopelessly outgunned, Edsall fought on for over an hour before disappearing into smoke and flame. Historians pieced together that she had been intercepted on March 1st, 1942. After being immobilized by shellfire and bombs, she was sunk at 14 degrees 9, 106 degree 47 E, roughly 260 miles south of Java. Only a handful of her crew may have survived the sinking, possibly captured and executed later by Japanese forces, though this remains uncertain. The incomplete Japanese reports add to the mystery. Why was Edsall so far off her expected route? Was she trying to protect a damaged ship, or running a diversion to draw fire away from retreating convoys? The last confirmed Allied contact was a faint transmission, under heavy attack, damage, attempting evasive action. It was never followed by coordinates. The Navy logged it as static interference, a chilling detail that later made investigators wonder if help could have come sooner. For those studying Pacific operations, Edsall became a symbol of bravery and uncertainty, a ship that fought far beyond its odds, yet vanished without trace or recognition for half a century. In 2003, a joint US-Indonesian dive team operating in the Java Sea discovered a badly corroded destroyer wreck resting upright in deep water. Analysis of hull shape and weaponry confirmed it. The Edsall had been found. Her guns were still trained skyward, suggesting the crew was fighting until the very end. The discovery brought closure, but also revived the mystery. Why did she engage such an overwhelming force? Was it duty, confusion, or a deliberate act of sacrifice to delay Japanese pursuit? The Edsall's story stands as the opening chapter of a tragic pattern. Ships lost not just to battle, but to silence. Every fragment of her final hours raises new questions about the chaos of early 1942. The lack of communication, the absence of air cover, the desperate improvisation of the Asiatic fleet. The sea had hidden her for 60 years, but even now she speaks, through twisted steel and unanswered signals. In the vast Pacific, the Edsall was only the beginning. For each mystery solved, others would surface. Deeper, darker, and equally haunting. Next came the Silent Hunter, a submarine that vanished beneath the same waters and stayed missing for half a century, the USS Perch. March 1942. The waters off Java were still boiling with the aftermath of Allied defeat. Japanese forces had seized control of the Dutch East Indies, and retreating American and British ships struggled to escape through tightening nooses of enemy patrols. Among those ships was a silent hunter of the Asiatic fleet, the USS Perch, SS-176, a porpoise-class submarine that would soon become one of the war's earliest and most enigmatic naval losses. Commissioned in 1936, the Perch was among the US Navy's most advanced submarines before the war, 300 feet long, armed with 6 torpedo tubes and manned by 54 sailors. Under the command of Lieutenant Commander David A. Hurt, the Perch operated from Surabaya, Java, tasked with reconnaissance and harassment missions against Japanese shipping. In late February 1942, with Japanese convoys pouring southward toward the Java Sea, the submarine was ordered to patrol near the north coast of Java, a dangerous assignment amid enemy destroyers and aircraft. Her last known transmission, sent on March 1st, was brief: damaged in action, attempting repairs. Then silence. For decades, that was all the Navy had. What had happened after that message remained a mystery, shrouded in rumor and fragmentary Japanese reports. Some claimed she had been hunted down by depth charges. Others believed she had scuttled herself to avoid capture. No survivors returned, and no confirmed sinking location was ever recorded. For over 60 years, Perch's name appeared only on a memorial plaque. Lost, March 3, 1942. Cause unknown. But beneath the silence lay a story of extraordinary endurance. Japanese records recovered after the war shed new light. On March 1st, near Surabaya, the Perch had attempted to attack a Japanese convoy escorted by destroyers Usugumo and Sazanami. The torpedo missed, and the convoy's escorts immediately retaliated. What followed was one of the most brutal depth charge attacks of the early Pacific War. For hours, shockwaves hammered the submarine as she dived deep, far beyond her safe limit. Lights flickered. Pressure hulls buckled. In his personal log, later found in Japanese custody, Commander Hurt recorded multiple leaks, control room flooding, engines disabled, no sound contact, situation desperate. Despite catastrophic damage, the Perch surfaced under cover of darkness that night, listing badly, unable to submerge. Her batteries were ruined, and several compartments were flooded. Commander Hurt made the agonizing decision to scuttle his ship rather than surrender her to the enemy. At dawn on March 3rd, Japanese destroyers closed in. The crew opened valves, set demolition charges, and abandoned ship under machine gun fire. Miraculously, all but 6 men survived and were taken prisoner. The Perch's ordeal did not end there. The captured sailors were interrogated, transferred through a network of prison camps in Java, Makassar, and finally Japan. They endured starvation, disease, and brutal forced labor. Yet some lived to tell the tale after the war. It was through their testimonies that the world first learned of Perch's desperate final hours. "We went down fighting," one survivor recalled. "Even when the sea closed over us, she went with honor." Still, the wreck itself remained hidden. In the 1990s, multiple expeditions tried and failed to locate her. It was not until 2006 that a British-Australian dive team discovered the submarine resting upright in 130 feet of water, off the north coast of Java. The hull bore the scars of depth charge blasts, jagged rents, twisted plating and imploded bulkheads, yet the hatches were open, confirming the crew had scuttled her intentionally. Inside, divers found personal effects: a wrench, a coffee mug, fragments of machinery, frozen in time. The find confirmed the accuracy of the survivors' accounts and shed light on the chaotic first months of the Pacific War. Perch's loss had not been in vain. Her final attack delayed Japanese convoys long enough to allow other Allied vessels to escape, but the mystery persisted. Why had her distress signal gone unanswered for so long? Post-war investigations revealed that Allied communications in Java were in total disarray. Stations were destroyed, frequencies jammed, and the few remaining operators overwhelmed. Perch had called for help, but no one was left to hear it. The rediscovery of Perch brought long-awaited closure to families who had spent decades without knowing their loved one's fate. Her rusting hull stands today as an underwater time capsule, a reminder of courage under impossible conditions and the chaos that defined early 1942. As divers drifted around her in silence, They described an eerie sensation, as if the submarine were still on patrol, waiting for orders that would never come. The sea had claimed her, but her story had survived, carried by the men who refused to let her memory vanish. Yet as the Allies regrouped in 1943, a new kind of tragedy would strike. Not a submarine, but an aircraft carrier. A floating fortress destined to meet its end in seconds, under circumstances that still raise haunting questions. Next, the loss of the USS Liscome Bay, November 1943. The Pacific War had shifted in favor of the Allies. The tide that once swept through Pearl Harbor and Java was beginning to turn. Across the Gilbert Islands, the US Navy launched Operation Galvanic, an ambitious amphibious assault to seize Tarawa and Makin, paving the way for the Central Pacific drive toward Japan. Among the ships supporting that invasion was the escort carrier USS Liscome Bay, CVE 56, a vessel whose name would soon become synonymous with one of the most devastating and mysterious naval explosions of World War II. Commissioned in August 1943, the Liscome Bay was part of the Casablanca-class escort carriers, smaller, lightly armoured ships built for speed and mass production. She carried a complement of 28 aircraft, including Grumman FM-1 Wildcats and TBF Avengers, and a crew of nearly 900 men. Her commanding officer, Captain Irving D. Wiltsey, was a veteran aviator who had survived the sinking of the USS Yorktown at Midway. He knew the risks of operating small carriers in hostile waters. By late November, Liscome Bay was operating off Makin Atoll as part of Task Group 52.3, alongside the carriers Coral Sea and Corregidor under Rear Admiral Henry Mullinix. Their mission: provide air support for ground forces fighting to secure Makin and repel any Japanese counterattack. The fighting on shore was fierce but nearing conclusion, and many believed the worst was over. But at 5:10 a.m. on November 24, 1943, the darkness of the Pacific pre-dawn hid a deadly threat. The Japanese submarine I-175, under Lieutenant Commander Sunao Tabata, had slipped undetected into the area. From a range of about 1,400 yards, the submarine fired a spread of torpedoes at the American formation. One struck Liscome Bay on her starboard side, directly in the vicinity of her bomb storage magazine. The result was instantaneous and catastrophic. A blinding flash tore through the ship, followed by a deafening roar that was seen and heard miles away. Witnesses aboard nearby vessels described the explosion as a volcanic eruption from the sea. The carrier was ripped in half. Fireballs erupted from her deck as fuel, ammunition, and aircraft ordnance detonated in a chain reaction. Within just 23 minutes, the Liscome Bay rolled over and sank, disappearing beneath the waves at 5:33 a.m. Out of 916 officers and crew, only 272 survived. Among the dead was Rear Admiral Mullinix, one of the few flag officers killed in action during the Pacific War, and Cook Third Class Doris "Dory" Miller, the African-American sailor who had been awarded the Navy Cross for heroism at Pearl Harbor. His death, like so many others that morning, came without warning or chance for escape. The Navy's official inquiry determined that the torpedo's detonation set off the ship's own bomb magazine, creating a secondary explosion of unimaginable force. Yet as the report circulated, questions lingered. Survivors described not just the explosion, but unusual communications and navigational errors in the hours before the attack. Some claimed radar detection had briefly shown an unidentified contact, which disappeared moments before the torpedo strike. Others noted confusion in the carrier's station keeping. The formation had shifted slightly during the night, possibly exposing Liscome Bay's vulnerable flank. Commander Wiltsey's last recorded order was calm and precise. All hands topside. Abandon ship. Moments later, the carrier's lights went out completely. Post-war analyses revealed that the escort carriers, while crucial to the island-hopping strategy, were highly susceptible to catastrophic damage. Their thin armor and volatile fuel loads made them floating powder kegs. Yet the loss of Liscome Bay was not merely a lesson in design vulnerability. It raised enduring questions about wartime coordination, radar reliability, and the unseen threats of submarine warfare. How had I-175 penetrated the screen undetected? Was it poor sonar calibration, a missed signal, or simply the cruel luck of war? Survivors' accounts painted haunting images. One aviator, Lieutenant John W. Brennan, recalled floating amid burning oil and debris. There were men on fire, the water itself on fire, and still, silence after the explosion. We waited for voices that never came. Others clung to life rafts as the horizon turned crimson from burning fuel, watching the ocean claim their ship and shipmates. In the aftermath, the Navy tightened anti-submarine protocols and refined escort formation procedures. The tragedy forced a re-evaluation of radar coordination and fuel storage practices. But even with these lessons, Liscombe Bay's fate continued to stand out. A perfectly aimed torpedo, a split-second chain reaction, and a vessel lost faster than any carrier before or after it. Today, the wreck of Liscombe Bay lies somewhere near Butaritari Island, over 2,000 fathoms deep, its precise location still unknown. It is both a grave and a mystery, sealed by pressure and time. No expedition has yet found the remains, and for families of those lost, that absence is a wound that has never fully closed. The sea, once again, had taken without explanation, but it would not be the last. Less than 2 years later, another ship, a heavy cruiser on a top-secret mission, would vanish in equally haunting silence, its tragedy unfolding in one of the war's darkest hours. Next, the story of the USS Indianapolis. July 1945. The Pacific War was entering its final act. Japan's cities lay in ruins, its navy shattered, its air force reduced to kamikaze desperation. Yet deep within the classified corridors of the US Navy, one final mission was underway. A delivery so secret that only a handful of men knew its true purpose. The ship chosen for that task was the heavy cruiser USS Indianapolis, CA-35, a proud vessel with a storied combat history. Within weeks, she would vanish, and her name would become forever linked to one of the most haunting tragedies in naval history. Commissioned in 1932, the Indianapolis had served with distinction throughout the Pacific Campaign, escorting carriers, bombarding enemy shorelines, and surviving multiple near misses. By 1945, she was under the command of Captain Charles B. McVay III, a seasoned officer from a distinguished naval family. Her final voyage began on July 16th, when she departed San Francisco, carrying a cargo unlike any other, components of Little Boy, the atomic bomb destined for Hiroshima. The mission was executed under extraordinary secrecy. Even McVay himself did not know the exact nature of the cargo. The Indianapolis steamed unescorted through the Pacific at high speed, reaching Tinian Island on July 26th, completing the top-secret delivery ahead of schedule. Afterward, she was ordered to proceed to Leyte Gulf, where she would prepare for the planned invasion of Japan. What followed remains one of the most chilling episodes of World War II. At 12:15 a.m. on July 30th, while sailing through the Philippine Sea, Indianapolis was struck by 2 torpedoes fired from the Japanese submarine I-58 Taos, commanded by Mochitsura Hashimoto. The first tore off her bow, the second exploded beneath her fuel tanks, triggering an inferno that engulfed the midsection. Within 12 minutes, the ship capsized and sank. Of her 1,196 crewmen, about 900 escaped into the water. No distress signal was ever received. For the next 4 days, the survivors drifted helplessly under a merciless sun, surrounded by salt water, exposure, and sharks. Many were injured, delirious, or clinging to life jackets that slowly deflated. There were men crying for help, calling for their mothers, and then there was silence. Survivor Edgar Harrell would recall decades later. Rescue never came, because no one knew they were missing. The reason was as shocking as it was tragic. Due to bureaucratic error and a breakdown in naval communication, Indianapolis was never reported overdue. Her movement orders were classified, her route considered routine, and no arrival confirmation system existed for independent transits. It wasn't until a routine patrol plane spotted the oil slick and survivors by chance, 4 days later, that the Navy realized the ship was gone. By the time rescue vessels arrived on August 2nd, only 316 men were still alive. The rest had succumbed to dehydration, exposure, drowning, or shark attacks. An ordeal that became one of the deadliest disasters in US naval history. For those who survived, the trauma was indescribable. It was hell, said boatswain's mate Second Class Lowell Dean Cox. The sea was alive with fins. You could hear the screams in the dark. The public outcry that followed demanded accountability. The Navy needed an explanation. and Captain McVeigh, despite having followed his orders, was chosen as the scapegoat. Court-martialed for hazarding his ship by failure to zigzag, McVeigh was convicted, even though the Japanese submarine captain himself testified that zigzagging would have made no difference. Decades later, the conviction would be posthumously overturned, but the damage was done. McVeigh, tormented by survivor guilt and public blame, took his own life in 1968 beyond its human cost. The loss of the Indianapolis raised enduring questions about wartime communication and naval readiness. How could a capital ship vanish unnoticed in 1945, when the Pacific was supposedly under Allied control? Why were her distress signals never received, despite later evidence that several stations had detected garbled SOS messages but failed to act on them? Even now, the full chain of errors remains debated, a web of secrecy, complacency, and misfortune that sealed the ship's fate. For over 70 years, the Indianapolis lay undiscovered beneath the Philippine Sea, its final resting place unknown. In 2017, a civilian research team led by Paul Allen finally located the wreck 18,000 feet below the surface. The ship was remarkably intact, her name still visible across the bow. For families of the crew, it brought long-awaited closure, though not comfort. As the deep-sea cameras swept over the hull, one could not help but feel the lingering presence of the men who died there, not as numbers in a report, but as sailors who had completed one of history's most consequential missions, only to vanish into silence days later. Their ordeal remains a study in courage, tragedy, and the thin line between heroism and catastrophe. The Indianapolis loss marked the twilight of the Pacific War, but not the end of its mysteries. For even earlier in the conflict, another submarine had disappeared in northern waters, one whose wreck would remain hidden for over 6 decades, its final transmission lost to time. Next, the enigma of the USS Grunion. June 1942. The Aleutian Islands, a cold, fog-shrouded chain stretching from Alaska toward Japan. Few Americans had heard of these isolated rocks before the war, yet in the early months of 1942, they became the northernmost battleground of the Pacific. Japanese forces had occupied Attu and Kiska, forcing the US Navy to fight not just an enemy, but nature itself. Storms, freezing seas, and relentless fog. It was into this unforgiving region that the submarine USS Grunion, SS-216, sailed, vanishing without a trace. The Grunion was a brand new Gato-class submarine, commissioned in April 1942. She was commanded by Lieutenant Commander Manat Abele, a 1936 Naval Academy graduate and respected tactician. After brief shakedown trials on the US West Coast, Grunion was assigned to patrol the Aleutian waters, intercept Japanese reinforcements supplying their northern outposts. The assignment was dangerous, the weather brutal, sonar unreliable, and visibility nearly non-existent. Departing Dutch Harbour on June 30th, Grunion carried 70 officers and men. Her orders: patrol the area around Kiska, engage enemy shipping, and report by encrypted radio every 3 days. For a time, she did just that. In mid-July, Grunion sank 2 Japanese patrol craft near Kiska Harbour and severely damaged a third. Her final confirmed radio message, sent July 30th, reported heavy anti-submarine activity and that she was low on torpedoes. She was ordered home to Dutch Harbour. The message was received. She was never heard from again. At first, the Navy assumed mechanical failure or a mine. The Aleutians were littered with both. But months later, intercepted Japanese communications suggested an engagement had taken place near the island of Kiska, one that matched the timing and position of Grunion's disappearance. According to these reports, a Japanese armed freighter, the Kanomaru, had been attacked by a US submarine on July 30th and had retaliated with depth charges and deck gun fire. The submarine was seen to dive sharply, leaving oil and debris, then vanish completely. Despite several post-war searches, the Grunion remained missing for over 6 decades. For the families of her crew, including Manat Abele's sons, Bruce, Brad, and John, the lack of closure became a lifelong quest. They combed naval records, Japanese logs, and oceanographic charts, searching for any clue. Their determination would eventually rewrite history. In 2006, Using side-scan sonar and modern imaging, the Abela brothers, working with the sonar company Williamson and Associates, discovered a submarine wreck off Kiska Island at a depth of nearly 3,000 feet. The wreck's distinctive silhouette, its deck gun, conning tower, and hull pattern confirmed it was the USS Grunion. The sonar images told a haunting story. The submarine had suffered catastrophic damage forward. Her bow was twisted, the torpedo room imploded. It appeared a torpedo, fired at close range, had malfunctioned and circled back. A circular run, a rare but deadly malfunction known to have claimed several submarines during the war. Further investigation in 2008 by the US Navy's Undersea Warfare Division confirmed this theory. The Grunion's final moments likely began with her attack on the Kanomaru. One of her torpedoes struck home, but another, possibly faulty, looped back toward the submarine. The resulting explosion tore through her bow, causing instant flooding. Unable to surface or blow ballast in time, she plunged into the depths. No distress signal was ever sent. The discovery brought closure, but also a deeper respect for the challenges faced by submariners in those early war years. The Mark 14 torpedo, the standard U.S. Navy weapon at the time, was notoriously unreliable, plagued by faulty detonators and guidance systems. For months, commanders' reports of duds and self-detonations were dismissed as operator error. The Grunion's wreck became irrefutable evidence of the weapon's flaws, proof written in steel and silence. In the words of Bruce Abel, speaking at the Navy Memorial Service in 2008, "We found our father's ship, but not his ghost. The ocean keeps its own secrets. It simply lets us visit." His sentiment echoed that of countless families who waited years, even decades, for closure that the war never gave them. What sets Grunion's story apart is not just the technical tragedy, but the devotion of those who refused to let her be forgotten. A family's persistence brought a lost submarine home, bridging generations and reuniting history with truth. The Aleutian winds that once howled over her final patrol now whisper across her resting place, a silent sentinel beneath frigid waves. Yet as each of these vessels, the Edsall, Perch, Liscombe Bay, Indianapolis, and Grunion, tells its own story of valor and mystery, a larger question emerges. How many more ships still lie undiscovered across the Pacific? Their crews entombed, their stories half told. The ocean guards its secrets well, and even now, its silence speaks volumes. Next, the conclusion, reflecting on the 5 mysterious U.S. Navy losses that still echo across the Pacific. From the burning equator to the frozen Aleutians, the Pacific Ocean became both battleground and grave during the Second World War. For the United States Navy, victory came at an unimaginable price. And among the wrecks scattered across its vast depths, some stories defy complete explanation. The fates of 5 ships, Edsall, Perch, Liscombe Bay, Indianapolis, and Grunion, form a haunting mosaic of courage, chaos, and unanswered questions. Each was lost under different circumstances, yet bound by a single theme: how quickly the sea can turn triumph into tragedy, and how long it takes for the truth to surface. The destroyer, USS Edsall, was the first to vanish, a small, aging vessel that faced the full power of the Imperial Japanese fleet alone in 1942. For decades, her disappearance was a blank page in history, until film recovered from Japanese archives revealed her desperate final stand. That grainy footage, a destroyer darting through shellfire, surrounded by geysers of exploding water, captured more than her last moments. It captured the chaos of early war, when bravery met futility on an unimaginable scale. Even today, her wreck off Java stands as a silent witness to the first mysterious loss of the Pacific campaign. Then came the submarine USS Perch, hunted beneath the same waters only weeks later. Her story, long untold, finally emerged through the words of surviving crewmen who endured years in Japanese prison camps. Their accounts told of a crippled submarine, flooding and blind, refusing surrender until no other choice remained. When divers finally found her in 2006, her open hatches and twisted hull confirmed their testimony. The Perch's wreck became more than a tomb, It was a vindication, proof that even defeat can bear the mark of defiance. A year later, in the Central Pacific, the USS Liscum Bay's end was swifter and far more horrifying. One torpedo, 1 second, and 900 men were gone. Her destruction during the Makin invasion remains one of the war's most violent naval explosions. Survivors spoke of lights flickering, confusion in formation, and a radar contact that appeared and vanished before impact. Small details that still spark speculation. Was it mechanical failure, human error, or simply the cruel arithmetic of war at sea? No one can say for certain. The Liscum Bay lies somewhere beyond reach, her coordinates lost, her story half submerged in rumor and grief. The heavy cruiser, Indianapolis, proud veteran of countless battles, carried the secret heart of the Manhattan Project, only to vanish in one of the war's final tragedies. Her crew's suffering in the Philippine Sea remains one of the most harrowing ordeals in naval history. Yet what makes her loss so haunting is not merely the horror that followed, but the silence before it. Bureaucratic oversight, miscommunication, and overconfidence combined to leave hundreds of sailors adrift, unnoticed, and forgotten until it was almost too late. The Indianapolis became a lesson written in blood and salt water, that even in victory, negligence can be as deadly as any enemy. And then there was the Grunion, lost in the frozen fog of the Aleutians. Her disappearance stood unsolved for 64 years, until her own commander's sons, armed not with weapons, but with persistence and technology, found her resting place. The evidence suggested a fatal irony. She may have been sunk by her own malfunctioning torpedo, the very weapon she had been ordered to wield. The ocean's cruelty took a different form that time. Mechanical failure born of haste and wartime pressure. In her discovery, the Grunion gave historians not only closure, but clarity about the dangers faced by every submarine crew that ventured into the deep. Together, these 5 losses trace the evolution of a war fought across both steel and uncertainty. From the desperate improvisations of 1942 to the technological race of 1945, the Pacific theater pushed men and machines to their limits. And yet, for all our modern tools, sonar, submersibles, digital mapping, the ocean still holds more secrets than it reveals. Each wreck found brings both relief and new mystery. Each unanswered signal from the past reminds us how fragile even the most formidable warship could be. As divers descend today into the quiet, lightless depths, they describe the sensation not as exploration, but visitation. The Edsall still lies with her guns pointed skyward. The Perch's hatches remain open to the dark. The Liscum Bay sleeps unseen, her location swallowed by time. The Indianapolis, deep in the Philippine Sea, bears her name like a monument. The Grunion rests off Kiska, her bow forever torn but her story finally whole. These are not just wrecks, they are chapters of a larger human story, of courage under pressure, of mistakes made in haste, and of mysteries that refuse to die. The Pacific may have claimed these ships, but it has not erased their memory. Each discovery, each name carved into a memorial wall reminds us that history's silences are not empty. They are filled with echoes, the creak of a hull, the whisper of radio static, the unending murmur of the sea. And somewhere, far below the waves, the unanswered questions still linger, waiting for the next diver, the next historian, the next signal from the deep, to bring their final truth to light.